Businesses in America today are losing millions of dollars every day to a lack of cybersecurity planning and implementation, plus a failure to educate employees on best practices. In addition, many organizations wait until they've suffered an attack before making operational changes. According to a recent Sophos white paper, 51% of organizations were hit by ransomware in 2020. The cost of experiencing a ransomware attack is estimated to be around $761,106 as a global average. Ransomware is a type of malicious software that is used by cyber criminals to lock all your data files and block access to them until you pay a ransom. Ransomware is designed to infect a single workstation and then spread throughout the network, encrypting all of the enterprise's files.
By encrypting the data, it has been converted into a format that cannot be deciphered by anyone except those parties who possess the proper digital keys. Lyle Lieberman is Chief Operating Officer at Janus Associates, the nation's first and oldest IT security consultancy. He begins our program by offering his perspective on ransomware and what he expects to see in the future.
Ransomware is going to continue to be a very, very severe issue. It's going to not only continue, it's going to get worse in my estimation, and there are a number of reasons for that. From a ransomware perspective, the cyber criminal very rarely, if ever, gets caught. They're outside the jurisdiction of the U.S., and so they're not afraid of U.S. Laws or being incarcerated in the United States. They're working typically in Eastern Europe, with the bulk of it coming out of Russia. My feeling, and this is my personal opinion, is that there's probably a connection between the ransomware operators and the government in Russia. It's kind of a, you pay us some money under the table, we'll leave you alone. It's known for a fact that the Russian and the Eastern European cyber warriors don't attack within their own country. And they do that so they don't draw the ire of the governments in power.
How is it that the cyber criminals can avoid attacking within their own country? Lyle explains.
One of the ways they avoid doing that, even by having it happen accidentally, is that they put code within the ransomware that says, look at the languages that are loaded onto the computer. So your computer and my computer, we have an English pack for typing and reading and writing and that sort of thing, the dictionary, and you may have a second language, Spanish or German or Greek, depending on where you're from. But typically, you and I and people who are going to be listening to this don't have Russian on their systems. So the ransomware operators put in lines of code that look at the language packs, and if they see Russian, if they see a Cyrillic language pack on the machine, the ransomware will not install itself. And this helps protect their business. And this is a business, plain and simple. It's an easy way to make a tremendous, tremendous amount of money. So ransomware is going to continue. They're getting more and more sophisticated in the types of attacks. There's recently a new variant of one of the more popular ransomwares that has figured out a way to defeat most, not quite all, but most of the anti-ransomware software applications that are out there. It's huge money. I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year in business. So they're going nowhere. They're going nowhere.
Should companies pay the ransomware? Lyle offers his views on this controversial strategy.
The thing to keep in mind also with ransomware is that if you pay, and authorities don't want you to pay the ransom, but if you pay it, A, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the decryptor key, the key to unlock your locked files. B, there are cases where you get the decryptor key, But when everything is unencrypted, the files are corrupted, some of them, some percentage of them, and you've lost that data, which takes us to backups, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. The other part of ransomware today is that the bad guys are not only locking up your system, but prior to doing that, or as they're doing it, they're stealing data. They're exfiltrating it. So they're taking your information on your competitors, your sales and marketing plans. They're taking emails. They're taking HR, whatever they can get or whatever they feel is applicable to their situation, they're stealing. And then the ransomware criminals are saying, if you don't pay us, we're going to dump your company data, your private data on the internet.
Next, Lyle tells us about the latest ransomware schemes.
The latest one with ransomware that's come out in the last week or so is where some of the ransomware gangs, one in particular, is saying, don't even think about contacting law enforcement or a professional negotiator, because there are professional negotiators that negotiate with the ransomware gangs to try to lower the number. And they say that, and they say, because if you do, we're just going to dump all your data. We're just going to dump your data publicly. We're going to put it on the dark web. Everybody will be able to see whatever we've taken. And most of the ransomware gangs are not just going for one small piece of data. They're stealing everything. So this way they have greater leverage.
Ransomware has also been increasing as insurance companies pay related claims. The New York State Department of Financial Services noted in their Cyber Insurance Risk Framework in February 2021 that the cost of ransomware has shaken up the cyber insurance market. Lyle Lieberman offers his views on ransomware and its connection to insurance.
If you stop and think what the business of an insurance company is, it's to collect premiums and to not pay claims. I mean, that's really what insurance companies do for a living. They collect money from you and I in the way of premiums, and they find a reason not to pay a claim. And if they have to start paying claims, they start raising their rates because they want to keep the profit levels high. So as far as the insurance companies go these days, anyone who has cyber insurance, and many corporations do in some cases, it's a requirement to do business within your sector. If you have cyber insurance, you better very, very carefully read the fine print. And if you're buying cyber insurance or renewing cyber insurance for the first time, it's also very important for you to read the fine print, and specifically the exclusions.
What are some examples of what would enable an insurance company not to pay a claim? Lyle offers an example from his own experience.
What will allow the insurance carrier to say, no, we're not paying that claim? And an example I'll give you is we have a client who suffered a ransomware attack and filed a claim with the insurance company. And as part of the claims process, the insurance company normally asks you a series of questions. What happened? What were you doing? What are your safety protocols? You know, how many people? The whole thing. They want to get a picture. And frankly, they're also fishing for a reason to exclude the claim. So as part of this disclosure process, the client told the insurance company when asked, how did this happen? They said, well, our employee clicked on an email, on a link in an email. And that allowed the insurance company to go back to the exclusions in the policy where it says, if you aid and abet the cyber criminal in getting into your systems, we will exclude the claim. We will not allow it to go through. And they said, your employee clicked on the link that aided and abetted the criminal in getting in. We're disallowing your claim. So, you know, cyber insurance is a business requirement, and in some cases it pays. My suggestion is read the exclusions, read the fine print. Better yet, have an attorney do so, because the policies are written in legalese. Again, my feeling, the purpose is to confuse the reader so they don't understand what's going on. Even the placement of a comma in a statement changes how the statement is interpreted legally. So my feeling is you should have your policy reviewed by an attorney who's experienced in insurance claims and that sort of thing.
Lyle tells us about his experience with the cost of cyber insurance.
Rates are going through the roof. We have a client who last year had a $5 million cyber insurance policy. When it came time for them to have it renewed, the insurance carrier turned around and said, we're no longer writing $5 million policies. We are writing 2.5, so one half the amount that you had last year, and we're charging you essentially the same amount. So that meant immediately the cost of their coverage doubled from a year ago. The client went back to the carrier and said, but we need $5 million coverage. That's a requirement of some of our business associates. The insurance company turned around and said, okay, we'll write you a secondary policy, an excess as it's known. And for the additional $2.5 million of coverage, they charged more than the face value of the smaller. So this organization's insurance from last year to this year went up 133% for the same amount of coverage. And the reason is because the insurance companies last year took a shellacking in claims. And, again, they're in business to make money. So insurance, cyber insurance is not the panacea. Most people think you need to carefully interpret what the policy says and expect sticker shock.
A company today cannot run its operations without access to its data. And with ransomware on its system, an organization will suffer tremendously and perhaps even go out of business. The sooner a company addresses its preparedness against ransomware, the less of a risk cyber attacks will pose on an organization's financial stability, day-to-day operations, and reputation. So what can a company do? In addition to security awareness training, here are some things that can help to minimize risks. Perform a thorough social engineering campaign. Social engineering campaigns often use email phishing tactics to determine how security aware employees are. Install, implement, and configure comprehensive endpoint security, antivirus, anti-malware, and anti-ransomware software coupled with next-generation firewalls and intrusion detection technology make it more difficult for cyber criminals to launch a successful attack. Automatic patching and software updates. A security routine needs to be established. Email filtering is part of a layered defense. By defining and blocking email types, IP addresses, and locations, a company can filter out attacks from bad actors. And be sure to back up data every day.
Lyle Lieberman tells us more about the steps a company can take to avoid or minimize the risk against ransomware.
There are a tremendous amount of steps. First and foremost, in our opinion, my company's opinion, is employee awareness training. And that is teach your team members what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. Now, most organizations today have some sort of cyber training when an employee first joins an organization. But studies have shown that within 90 days, most of that knowledge is forgotten. And as such, cybersecurity training, security awareness training for your employees should really happen once every 90 days because there are new threats, there are new ways that the bad guys can get in, and so you want to keep your employees tuned into what's going on. Also, create a sense of ownership. Most people think when they work for a company, oh, cybersecurity, well, that's the responsibility of the security guys. And yes, it is, but it's also the responsibility of the individual employee. And it's important to let the employee know, share with them, look, you're an employee here and we pay you, and that's how you make a living. If, God forbid, a worst case scenario comes and we get crushed by a ransomware attack or another form of cyber attack, if we have to curtail operations, or our business is hurt substantially, or God forbid we have to shut down, who's going to suffer? The answer is you are, the employee. There may have to be layoffs, divisions may have to close, the business may have to be sold, or worst case scenario, it may shut down. And a fair amount of businesses after a severe cyber attack 2 years later are out of business. So you don't want to scare your employees, but you do want to give them a sense of ownership and say, it's not just us, it's also you, and we're all in this together, and we're trying to protect our organization, your livelihood, from being hurt. So, again, I think employee awareness is one of the most important things.
Lyle talks about some other techniques that can minimize or prevent a ransomware attack.
There are lots of pieces of hardware and software that can be installed, what's called endpoint protection, which is in the past known as antivirus solutions that are much more sophisticated today. Anti-ransomware applications such as Intercept X by Sophos is a very good product and one we've been using throughout our enterprise for 4 years now. There are firewalls, state-of-the-art firewalls. There are applications that watch the web traffic, what's coming in, but also what's going out, what's being exfiltrated. And that type of software, if it sees all of a sudden that at 2 o'clock in the morning, someone's computer is dialing out to Eastern Europe or China or Latin America, and all of a sudden there's a lot of data being sent out to the internet, it can see that and generate an alarm and or shut down the connection and hopefully prevent severe damage. So there are applications like that. I think those are some of the good ones. There's email filtering. There's two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication, a lot of people are unhappy with it until they get used to it because they're used to clicking on a link and they're online and up and running, or maybe entering a password and again, hitting enter and they're authenticated and they're up and running.
Lyle explains why single-factor authentication is not so secure.
The problem, of course, with single-factor authentication is that most people's passwords are out on the internet, and there are literally billions of user ID and password combinations that are for sale cheap. And the bad guys buy them in block, and then they write a program, and let's say you're Joe's Sandwich Shop. So they set up a file that ends with joesandwichshop.com, and it just takes every combination of password and user ID that's out there, and it fires it at the server. And if the server recognizes one of them because it hasn't been changed, then the bad guys are in the door. So, there are things like two-factor authentication. Duo Mobile, for instance, is one of the main products. You log in your password, you click on something and your phone chirps, and you have to pick up your phone and acknowledge that it's you. More sophisticated two-factor authentication are things like biometrics, fingerprints, voice prints, iris recognition, but that's really more the realm of the military. So two-factor authentication is also, at this point, really should be part of every corporate infrastructure, especially for anyone who's remoting in via a laptop, a desktop, a smartphone, a tablet, anything like that.
There are several techniques a company can consider in order to protect their organization. One is called external penetration testing. Lyle tells us more about this technique.
So think in terms of external penetration testing as a test that allows a security professional who doesn't work for your organization to sit on the outside and to, in simplest terms, knock on the doors, check the windows, see where an opening might be for a cyber criminal to break in. Now, obviously, they're not just knocking on the door. This is very sophisticated testing, and sometimes it's very sophisticated. Other times it's brute force, where they're just throwing everything at your external infrastructure, which could be your website, it could be your email servers that are on the internet, it could be web applications that are on the internet, just trying to figure out ways to break in. So that's an external test. Typically, they're done what are called eyes shut, meaning the tester doesn't know anything about your infrastructure except he or she knows that you've got servers at these IP addresses. And think of an IP address basically as a street address for your house. And so they just go and they look at it, and once they figure out what's out there in your IP range, then they just start hammering it, quite honestly, to see if they can break in. A report is generated and handed back to the security team or the chief information officer or whoever is ordered up the testing that says, we have found these deficiencies in your system and this is where someone could break in. They are ranked in order of severity, and critical basically is a stop everything you're doing and fix it now. And so that's basically what an external test is.
Cybersecurity issues are here to stay. In order to minimize the impact from a ransomware attack and to ensure your organization's internet protocol is protected at all times, a company needs to take careful, prudent steps to put processes into place that will help control data, users, and the digital environment. Some of the steps to take include training staff regularly on best practices for cybersecurity, backing up data on a known schedule, storing it properly, and testing the ability to restore it if and when needed. Testing staff susceptibility to various attacks, and on a periodic basis, testing the perimeter defenses of the company's cyber systems to determine the strength of its firewalls and vulnerability to ransomware.
Earlier, Lyle Lieberman told us about external penetration testing. Now he tells us about another technique used to protect an organization, web application testing.
Web application testing. Think in terms of a web application as being if you log on to your company's HR system remotely, or their timekeeping system remotely, or a website application, or the website. And so when people build software, when they write code, these people are, as a rule, very good at what they do. But their focus is business. Their focus is building this application so it does exactly what the vice president of sales wants or the vice president of e-commerce wants. Their goal is to build something that works properly, that works quickly, and frankly looks pretty. That's their goal. They aren't thinking, as a rule, regarding security. And it's when software is being written, it's much easier to bake the security portion of it into the process when it's being written. Unfortunately, in most cases, I should say a lot of cases, that doesn't occur.
Lyle explains what actually happens during a web application test.
The web application security testing is somewhat similar to the other tests, and that is a security professional looks at the code, the actual code. That would be a code analysis, and that's line by line by line of code to see if something is turned on, turned off, left open, not closed properly, which would allow the bad guys to gain control of that web application, to take it over. So what does that mean? That means that if you've got an e-commerce website And even if you aren't processing the credit cards yourself, which is generally the case, in most cases that's done by a third party, but you've got a shopping cart. If the bad guy can get in, they can sit there and just monitor all the transactions, depending on what the flaw is. When somebody enters in a credit card number, including the CV code and also the expiration date, they can skim that information. So now they have credit card information. They can get names, addresses, phone numbers of the people who are purchasing. And if they get the names, the addresses, the phone numbers, and the credit card information, they can then go and, in some cases, hijack that credit card from the original owner. They can also set up phony orders. So now merchandise is shipping out of your warehouse possibly without it actually being paid for, or with it being paid for by someone else's credit card. And then they just change the ship to address. We all know on Amazon that you can have a bill to and a ship to. So the bill to comes to your credit card, but the ship to for that nice new camera is my house. Web application testing is important, not only from an e-commerce standpoint, but just from a general corporate standpoint.
With all the external cyber threats that are out there today, Lyle offers his opinion on how important it is for a company to have someone who is focused exclusively on information security.
Having a chief information security officer, or even an ISO, an information security officer, really is the right way to go, because that person focuses on security. That's their job. Policy and procedures, hardware, software, heavily involved in the incident response planning, that sort of thing. But it's also important that if you do have an ISO or a CISO, that they don't report to the chief information officer or whoever is running day-to-day IT operations. And that may seem a little bit strange, but it's really a matter of the fox and the hen house. The information security officer's role is to make sure that everything is set properly, that all the policies and procedures are written properly, and that they're being followed correctly. And also to look for chinks in the armor. Are the firewalls properly deployed? Are they set up properly? If that person is reporting to a higher level within the information technology group and says, listen, we have a laundry list of problems that's this big, the CIO may not want to publicize that fact, because it then makes he or she look like they're not doing their job. So it's a matter of protecting that person trying to protect his or her fiefdom. For that reason, you want the ISO or the CISO to report to someone such as the chief financial officer. Probably not the chief executive officer, but in a lot of cases they go to the CFO, or they go to a compliance, if there's like a chief privacy officer, chief compliance officer, someone like that. So they're working with IT, but they're not owned by IT.
Lyle Lieberman leaves us with his final thoughts.
The closing thought really is, now is the time to really look at your plans, look at what you're doing. Don't get scared. Train your employees regularly, like clockwork, not just when they first join your organization, but preferably every 90 days, certainly every 6 months rather, at the minimum. And again, create a sense of ownership, a sense of teamwork. There are some organizations that create teams within departments and run contests and give prizes. And the prizes don't have to be huge. It's the group that scores the highest point in your e-learning program gets lunch on the company next Friday. pizza. Doesn't have to be a steak dinner, but make it exciting. Or gift cards, small gift cards, $10 or $15, $20 gift cards at Amazon or Starbucks or wherever. You want to bring your employees into the process, make them feel like they're part of the process, and make them understand that it's in their best interest to protect the business. So those would be some of my takeaways, and certainly keep your ear to the ground. If you have a problem, don't panic. Bring in professionals. It's better to have a professional lined up in advance so that if you do have a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not running around going, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? But rather you pick up the phone and you call Lyle or you call whomever, and that person wakes everybody up in their organization and says, Joe's Donuts has a problem, and, let's get moving on it. So, align yourself with a good organization, train your employees, spend your money wisely. Don't just go throwing it at the first person who walks in the door. And I hate whatever to say this, but good luck. Good luck. It's unfortunately, it's not a matter of if you're going to get attacked. It's a matter of when. And the idea is to prevent the bad guys from getting in, or if they do, to minimize the risk.